We live in a world of great good and great evil. Humanity has a capacity for inspiring kindness and depraved cruelty. The spectrum of human kindness to cruelty is far wider than that of any other animal. This gives rise to an interesting reality. We are subject to pains and pleasures that flow both from nature and our fellow humans. Our intelligence means we can fall into a massively diverse range of perspectives on this reality. Some of us have great optimism, some have great pessimism, others fall somewhere in between. Both optimistic and pessimistic understandings of reality appeal massively to me, just as I imagine they do to a large number of people. Normally this varies depending on my current mood, as I am once again sure it does with a great many people. Today I want to look at pessimistic and optimistic understandings of reality. Ideally, we will come to some kind of conclusion which considers both what reality is and how the way in which we view the reality shapes our interactions with it. Be warned, if your mood is easily crushed, you probably don't want to listen to this. Do be warned that I think this view is not entirely accurate and very much unhelpful. I am opposed to this very pessimistic description of reality. Regardless, when talking about pessimism, I wanted to give an example of a highly pessimistic view. Don't take this to be some objective description of reality, or a description of reality worthy of embracing. I think it is anything but. I, however, think it is important that I describe the pessimistic view. If I do not, we will not properly be able to compare pessimism and optimism. The pessimistic view, as I see it, goes something like this. The history of life is the history of suffering. Sentient existence is an existence of misery and torment. We toil onwards because natural selection has ensured we are essentially programmed to do just that. There is no free will. We are just biological puppets, hunks of organic matter with the unfortunate characteristic of sentience. We trudge through life along a predetermined path. We are slaves to determinism on our painful, meaningless journey. We live in a world devoid of meaning and morality. Our world is full of injustice, cruelty, and barbarism at every level. Everywhere people suffer and toil for the benefit of others. Oppression and exploitation is rampant on every level of society. Between nations, between classes, between individuals. Everywhere, social, political, and private tyranny crushes any semblance of freedom. Things people have no control over dictate the whole course of their life, their pain, their pleasure, their success, their failure, and then the society pretends it was in some sense justified and meritocratic in some way. There is no semblance of justice. Sentient life has always entailed nothing but suffering, and it always will. That is the pessimistic understanding of reality. It is not just pessimistic either, it is incredibly pessimistic. It can sometimes be something of a tempting view. I, however, don't think it is particularly useful. In fact, I think it only leads to more misery than is necessary. It is true, the world is in many respects a miserable place, but obsessing over that fact only makes it a lot more miserable. The great flaw of extreme pessimism is that in its obsession with the flaws of the world, it only makes things worse. Do not let my pessimistic explanation make you dreary. Now let's look at a more optimistic understanding. In my view, the optimistic understanding of reality is something of a response to the pessimistic understanding. Its primary claim is that the pessimistic understanding of reality only makes things worse. As I have said, existence has a great many flaws, but obsessing over and fixating on those flaws will only make that existence worse and more miserable than it needs to be. We should be more optimistic because in doing so, we immediately make the world a better, happier place. If given the choice between the complete misery of pessimism and the far happier optimistic view, I will always choose the latter, because I am a rational actor, and rational actors want to be happy. Optimism is best, not because it is necessarily accurate, but because it is desirable. It makes us happier, and that is what matters the most. We are only highly pessimistic because things are bad. But why make things more bad by being highly pessimistic? It makes sense to instead be optimistic because this makes life happier. Optimism makes the world a better place, both for the optimistic person and everyone else. Optimism also empowers people. They view their perceptions as being of their own making, rather than dictated by what the observable reality actually is. It is very empowering to choose happiness in the face of an unjust and cruel world. This doesn't mean being happy about the injustice, it means being happy in spite of it. It means not letting the injustice rob you of all your happiness. Optimism allows us to take control over how we interact with and view reality. Pessimism is a worldview enslaved by their reality. High levels of pessimism can lead to inaction, as people give in to despair, hopelessness, and misery. Optimism has a good capacity to solve problems because optimism has hope at its core, and hope is the thing which ultimately motivates solutions to many of the problems we face. Also worth noting is that things can be made better. In this sense, the optimistic view could be seen as accurate. Things can improve. We can make reality better. Ultimately, at its core, the optimistic view of reality is defined by the idea that optimism makes everyone happier. It makes existence better. It serves our desire for happiness. It is superior to pessimism, which in its obsession with the flaws of the world only makes it worse. Here I have provided something of a reductive view, I think. It is not as simple as extreme pessimism versus extreme optimism. There is a ton of nuance and space in between these things. That is well worth taking into consideration. As you can see, I normally side with optimism more than pessimism because it tends to make us happier and can inspire hope, which leads to positive progress and a better world. Extreme optimism can, however, also have flaws, if people refuse to acknowledge and address very real and serious issues. I think the ideal view is a mixture of both. Let's say 65% optimism and 35% pessimism. The 65% optimism makes sure we are fairly happy and don't give in to despair, and in doing so make the world a worse place. It also gives us the hope we need to drive changes that improve things. It makes sure we are aware of the reality that things can get better. The 35% pessimism makes sure we are in touch with reality and are able to recognize the many serious problems that exist. It also makes sure we know things can get worse. I think this balance is ideal. It means we are optimistic, happy and hopeful about existence, and also capable of spotting serious problems which we have good reason to address. Optimism should lead, but pessimism also has a place. What about realism? Everyone likes to think that they are a realist. I think that a great many of these people are obsessed with what reality is. This can be a mistake. We must also consider the lens we observe reality through, and how sometimes it may actually be in our interest to use an inaccurate lens, if it leads to greater happiness, as optimism undeniably does. It isn't about what is, it is about what understanding serves us the best. Understanding reality is only valuable insofar as it serves us, and extreme pessimism does not serve us. A degree of pessimism serves us, but it must be carefully balanced. If you take anything away from this, let it be that understanding reality is not necessarily about actually understanding reality. It is about improving our lives. It is about generating happiness. Sometimes that means seeing things for what they are, and sometimes it means being happy and hopeful in the face of a misery-inducing world. A good degree of optimism makes us happier, empowers us, and generates the hope which fuels positive change. Even as we face the cruelty and suffering of existence, maintaining optimism is an imperative. Without optimism, the world only becomes a darker place.